Hello, friends and brothers. This is Justin Jones with Masonic Improvement, and joined with my co-host, Brother Dennis Yates. Hello, Dennis.
Hello. I tell you what, I am so excited about tonight. We have got for the second time the world renowned Pete Norman on our show. And I'm very excited. It's always a great pleasure. Pete is one of the brothers that anyone can sit down and talk with about any topic in Freemasonry. And today is a special day because we're coming up on election season. We've got a lot of Worshipful Master hopefuls coming up, and we've got a lot of people that may or may not know what their role is in that position. I think we could learn a little bit from Brother Pete's experience and talk a little bit about what it is to not be the worst Worshipful Master in history.
Since we're talking about Pete's experience, for those watching, Pete has been a secretary at St. Albans Lodge for like 30 years. And if you have not had the opportunity to visit St. Albans, it's the best in practice lodge. If you want to see what a lodge does right, like what you can do to be successful as a Masonic lodge, go visit St. Albans because
St. Albans was purposely made a best in practice lodge.
Mm-hmm.
And it was purposely, everything was done purposely to be this best in practice lodge. And, Pete was the first Worshipful Master because a lot of it was his brainchild. And now he's the secretary as well.
So I was 11 when he became secretary. So
thanks a lot.
You got to love those millennials, man. They keep it real.
Thanks a lot.
So he has seen a lot of Worshipful Masters. So we are so glad to have you back on the show, Pete.
It's good to be here. It's good to be here.
So rolling right into this, recently there was a post that was made, and you and I had, all three of us had talked about this previously. In fact, on our last show, after the show, we had talked about different things that you could come back on and talk about because there's so many different things. But this was one of the things that we had talked about a show having. And then you brought it up online, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is the perfect time. Pete, I would like for you to give a little preface to it, as well as kick things off with that number one, what not to do as a Worshipful Master.
See, you keep saying that, and that's not what this is. This is 10 steps to help you be the worst Worshipful Master ever, right?
Get your facts right, Dennis.
If you aspire to be the worst Worshipful Master your lodge has ever had, here's what you got to do right here.
The good news is there's a lot of Worshipful Masters and possible soon-to-be Worshipful Masters that already checked a lot of marks on here. So just find out where you're lacking and pick up the slack, and you too can be the worst Worshipful Master your lodge has ever seen.
Nobody likes a quitter, right?
Exactly.
Now, let me start off by saying, and actually Dennis and I talked about this on the phone earlier, and that is that a lot of guys go into the East thinking that they've got to come up with new ideas. They got to have some kind of new exciting program or something for their year in the East. And I've gotten to the point where I kind of disagree with that. What I think is that if you and your lodge officers and your members have created a tradition that you like, that you're comfortable with a calendar for the year that has certain things that you do, whether it's a 4th of July picnic or whether it's a holiday banquet in December, or whether it's the day that you have your installation of officers, or, you've got all these traditions. What it boils down to is you have a course plan for your Worshipful Master, and you expect him to steer that course. And so the analogy that I use is, in the days of sailing ships, if you were going to sail a ship from, let's say, London, England, and you were going to go down to Argentina in the southern tip of South America, and the navigators had put together a course line for you on maps and charts and whatnot, and you're the captain, it's your job to steer that course, right? And you don't get halfway there and decide that you're the captain, so you're just going to take the ship off and do curlicues in the ocean, or you're going to go detour off into the Caribbean and go lay on the beach for a couple of weeks. No, that's not what the crew, that's not what the passengers expect of you. They expect you to steer the course, right? And too often, I think worshipful masters think that they get to plan the course, and to heck with everybody in the lodge, they're going to do what they want to do. So that's a pretty good preface for these 10 points. Do you want me to read you the first point?
Yes, let's jump into it. But that is the perfect preface, because it really does highlight exactly why you don't want to be bad at your job, and you should know what your job is.
We actually had a man that I suspect in retrospect was very nervous about going into the East. I didn't know it at the time because he was very bold and very brash. And he would say, so this is point number one. He would say, I know how to be a leader. He was in the Army, and he'd been an enlisted man in the Army, but he said, I know how to be a leader. I know how to be a leader. And he said that repeatedly all throughout the year that he was senior warden. And looking back on it, I suspect that he knew deep in his gut that he had no idea how to be a leader. And he was trying to overcome that by boasting that he did know how to be a leader. So point number one is boast that you know how to be a leader. Repeat that frequently to your lodge members. The reactions you get will help you identify those that have their doubts.
Well, I'll just say that leadership in the military looks a lot different than leadership in a volunteer organization.
Yeah. Yeah. You cannot order your lodge members to charge the enemy.
No.
You know, you're going to have to persuade them. You're going to have to work with them. You're going to have to massage them a little bit. Okay. Point number two is, and this follows right on that. Point number two is be a dictator. Be loud, bold, brazen, arbitrary, overbearing, mean-spirited. Be a dictator. Make your lodge members fear your temper. This will help you prove your commanding leadership style. Do not seek the consensus of your lodge members. Remember, you can be a commanding leader only when the vast majority disagree with you. You must force them to submit to your will, and you must crush those who don't. Now, remember, this is how to be the worst worshipful master ever.
Yeah, that's a pretty rough one right there. And it's difficult because of the term worshipful master. A lot of your younger Masons don't really understand that term. More of honorable. It's more of an honorable position. It's not, all hail to the worshipful master. This is one that position holds honor. And if you're not admired by the craft, where is that honor?
Yeah.
That
you're not going to be honorable unless you act honorable.
That's right.
It's as simple as that. So point number three is ignore good advice. When older, more experienced lodge members and past masters attempt to give you advice, you should take that as a personal insult. Rebuff them immediately.
He's making me want to laugh each time. Oh my goodness. Only because as a past master, I know how painful those things can be, because I come from a business world and I have owned several businesses, and I've always told my employees what to do. And that was a lesson for me, was to learn that you can't just tell people what to do. You need to get the buy-in. Just like when you're selling a car, you got to get the buy-in if you want somebody to do something that they're volunteering for as well.
And if you're in business, there's a lot of times that old warehouse manager, he probably knows a lot of stuff you don't know.
Yes.
You might ought to listen to him.
It's just the classic situation of the ego being the enemy. If you're going into the East with a big ego, you're gonna have a really rough year. Or
Sure.
your lodge is gonna have you might have a fine year actually, but the lodge is gonna have a rough year.
Yeah, exactly. So point number 4 is violate the lodge traditions. Most lodges have traditions. A lodge tradition may be something as simple as having an annual lodge picnic on the 4th of July. Pick 2 or 3 of these traditions and trample them underfoot.
Really, you can do one. You can pick one, and you pick the right one, and that's all it takes. You'll go down in history.
You'll get ostracized.
Yes.
Well, a few years ago, over the last 30 years, my lodge had developed certain traditions. There were just certain ways that we did things. And a lot of times, the way that we did things were very different from the way that other lodges do. For instance, we've never had an open installation. We don't like open installations. We don't believe in them. We always have a tiled installation, and we do it at our July stated meeting. And we're very happy with that. And we usually follow that with a festive board at the hotel where we have a steak dinner. And that's just a lodge tradition, right? And so we started talking about some of the traditions we had in our lodge. And we thought it might be a good idea to just make a list of them. Just say, these are the lodge traditions. And we created a list of standing rules. And these are standing rules that the lodge must follow. They're not bylaws because they're separate from the bylaws, but they are binding upon the officers and members. One of the standing rules is that the worshipful master and one other warden can overrule any one of the standing rules if need be. And the lodge could vote to overrule a standing rule. If so, you're not painted into a corner. There's always a way out, right?
Nice.
But no one man, the worshipful master, cannot violate a standing rule by himself. And so one of those traditions that we codified into our standing rules was that we never have 2 meetings in any given month. So we don't meet every month. And so that gives us a number of months when we're dark. Well, that's when we do degrees. But we don't want to confer a degree in a month when we also have a stated meeting. That would be 2 meetings in the same month. And some of our members would probably rebel because we're not a degree mill. We're not going to meet every month or every week. We're not going to be down there every Monday night conferring degrees. We're just not going to do that. One of the reasons we created this lodge was to get away from that sort of thing. Anyway, that was one of the lodge traditions that was violated by one of our worshipful masters, who was seeking to be the worst worshipful master ever.
What's interesting with that scenario is that you have cultivated a lodge meeting where there's always education, there's pause for reflection, there's certain traditions that are upheld going into and out of lodge that make you realize it prepares you for what you're fixing to take on, and then it prepares you to go back out into the world. You know, you accentuate the ritual, you accentuate the lessons in Freemasonry that we're taught when we go through the degrees. You may do less things within the lodge, like not wearing out all your members, but when you are there, it's very valuable, it's very impactful, and your members, they flock to it because they only get it a few times a year instead of being mandatory to go all the time.
Right.
You have a full house. It's almost standing room every time you have a meeting. And that's just amazing for any lodge to have that. Your membership shows up.
And we have visitors that drive in from out of town and spend the night at the local hotel and drive home the next day.
That would be me.
I was one of those a few years ago. One of the best experiences I had. I'll also say that's also proof that you don't have to meet 12 times a year. You don't have to have 12 stated meetings. And
Try doing 24.
yeah, I'm just saying,
I'm a secretary of that lodge.
if your
That's tough.
lodge, if Grand Lodge was to say you can only meet 4 times a year, you would find a way to handle all your board business in 4 meetings. And then you can use the other meetings for degrees and things like that. And there's no reason, I don't care what lodge it is, you can handle all your business in 4 meetings. If
You'd
you have
probably
a
find out
committee's
you don't
got
have that much business.
you
I
would.
would I would warn you though, we went through a period a number of years ago, 20 years ago. We went through a period where we only had 4 meetings a year. And what I found was that the lodge began to fragment. In other words, um, we weren't getting together enough and having FaceTime with each other enough to keep the lodge together. And so at that point, we went back to 5 meetings a year. And we like that a little bit. Now we meet 7 times a year. We have 4 quarterly meetings around the calendar where we follow that with a festive board dinner, a steak dinner. And then we have 3 additional meetings that we call business meetings. And those are purely business. There's nothing exciting about them. They're read them, we don't read them, but we approve the minutes. We hear the treasurer's report. We have committee reports. We ballot on candidates. We do all the mundane business of the lodge in those 3 meetings. And so we joke about the fact that if we can take care of all our business in 3 meetings, we don't understand why other lodges have to have 12.
Yeah.
They're all stated though.
Our bylaws say that we meet on the 3rd Thursday of the month.
Mhm.
Okay. But Grand Lodge law allows the Worshipful Master to cancel a meeting, provided that you meet at least once every 90 days. So we don't, we easily meet every 90 days. I think the longest stretch we may go is from our October meeting to January meeting, because we skip November, December.
Interesting.
Wow, that's a relief during the holidays.
Yeah.
Well, there have been a few times that we moved our October meeting to November just for various reasons. One year, the hotel could not accommodate our dinner in October, so we just did it in November, right? We emailed everybody, let them know what was going on, and took care of it that way. But I think it keeps the members and officers from getting burnt out. Let me put it that way. And then they look forward to the next meeting.
Yes, that's nice. And then also, it doesn't make your district deputy show up at every meeting either. So you were telling me before that you have one meeting is just for the district deputy at the beginning of the year, and then one meeting is for the district deputy at the end of the year. And those are 2 of your actual business meetings.
Well,
and then you have that one other, correct?
In February, we have a business meeting where we receive the district deputy and
Yes.
take care of all of our other business. And then in June, we have a business meeting when we elect officers. And then in September, we have a business meeting and we receive the district deputy again. So that takes care of the 2 district deputy receptions, and it takes care of the night when we elect officers. And then we also have our 4 quarterly meetings, which are in January, April, July, and October. And those are the 4 meetings that are followed by a festive board at the hotel. We have a private dining room set up for us at the hotel. We have a steak dinner with a program about masonry following dinner.
That's awesome.
Anyway,
Dennis and I attended one of your festive boards last year. Was it last year that we went to that one, Dennis? The one at the
I
golf
think so.
course?
Yes.
And that was really good. I enjoyed that. I couldn't make it this year, but I enjoyed it last year.
Well, we have our annual lecture, by the way, which we like to bring in an outside speaker, usually somebody that's published a book. And we've been doing that since the late 1990s. This year, we combined the lecture with our April meeting. And so our speaker was Brother Billy Hamilton from Fort Worth, who has a brand new book out. So yeah, he's a past master of Fort Worth Lodge, and he's a past master of Texas Lodge Research. So we were glad to have him.
Yeah.
Number 5 is break the rules. If the lodge has set rules, and we just covered this, pick at least 1 or 2, brazenly violate them, and then dare the members to do anything about it. That refers to our standing rules, which we talked about. Let me move to item number 6.
Okay.
Make anger your first response to any disagreement you may have with members, officers, or past masters. Once you disagree and become angry with someone, remain angry with them for the remainder of the year. Now,
Yeah.
I have to tell you, every one of these, I didn't make any of these up. I've experienced every one of these 10
Oh my goodness.
items.
The sad thing is that just about every Mason out there that's been around for more than 5 years has probably experienced it in one lodge or another with one brother or another.
I just hope and pray you don't have one worshipful master that does all 10 of these.
Maybe adds a few more while he's at it.
Yeah.
Right.
Who knows? Maybe next year I'll have 12 on the list.
There you go.
Right. Yes. That's funny.
Number 7, and this is really important because this actually happened. Argue loudly about politics and religion. When the brethren gather for fellowship, you should enter into an argument about politics or religion, preferably with an older past master. Respond to him by loudly calling him an expletive applied to his political or religious persuasion. Do this loudly enough so that no one else in the room can have a conversation.
Wow.
Now, that actually happened one night after lodge. And it went on and on and on. And the past master was just backpedaling the whole time, just kind of saying, well, I'm sorry, but that's just, I mean, I'm sorry, that's how it is. That's how I feel, you know. But the worshipful master was just berating him, saying, oh, well, you're just a damn fill in the blank, right? And
Wow.
and he was doing it so loud. There were probably 12 of us sitting on the back porch trying to smoke cigars and have conversations. Nobody could have a conversation because of the volume coming out of the worshipful master's mouth. And this went on for 20 minutes or more. I went to the Grand Lodge Law Book and I found you've got Anderson's Constitutions of Freemasonry in the front of the book as part of the Constitution.
Yep.
And one of those is behavior after the lodge is over, but the brethren not gone. And it talks about how you should behave after lodge when you're having fellowship with the other brethren. And I made a copy of it. And about a week or so later, we had a Scottish Rite meeting. And after the Scottish Rite meeting, I asked the worshipful master, I said, would you meet me for a beer over at the pizza place? And he said, sure. And so he met me over there and I gave him this. And I said, I want to read you something. And I read him that thing from Anderson's Constitution. And I said to him, you violated that following our last meeting when you got into that loud conversation with one of our past masters. His response was, look back at point number 6, make anger your first response. He got angry with me and he remained angry with me for the rest of the year because I had tried to give him some fatherly advice, which he ignored, which is point number 3, by the way.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're supposed to do is whisper wise counsel. We're not supposed to discuss our shortcomings in front of everybody. We're supposed to take people aside and talk to them and try to help people learn and not make worse of the situation by putting it out there in front of everyone. And that's exactly what you did. You tried to give him wise counsel. And that's disappointing that it would be received in any other way. There's a past master that I know that God bless him. I'd like to think that he didn't mean it, but one time he said, "This is such and such brother. He's our lodge Mexican," and I'm like, "Oh my God, you just said that out loud in front of a lodge full of people." And that brother came back a few more times, and then finally he stopped showing up. And then the brother that said it, he was finally talked to, and he no longer comes to the lodge. But that's one of those things. When he was confronted on it, there was an argument about it. It was doubling down on bad behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me move to number 8.
Yes.
Misuse your lodge funds.
Oh, definitely.
There are ways that you can misuse lodge funds without being accused of theft. For example, use the lodge charity fund for some pet project. I mean, this is just a tip, right? You know, if you really want to be the worst worshipful master ever, you might think about this as one of the arrows in your quiver, so to speak.
Yeah, you make sure you give some money to a project that's going to build up your own interests.
Well, we had a worshipful master that wanted to spend, I don't know, $150 or so on flowers for a Mason that had died in our area that was not even a member of our lodge. And we had never spent lodge money, much less charitable money. And we have a charity fund that's separate from the lodge treasury. We had never bought flowers for anyone's funeral, even members of our own lodge. And that's because individual members like myself and others, we do oftentimes buy flowers when somebody dies. I've had several very good friends. You know, I look back at the year that I was worshipful master back in 1992, 93. And my senior warden is now dead. My junior warden is now deceased. The lodge secretary from that year is now deceased. And I've been to all 3 of those funerals. And I bought flowers for their funerals. And sometimes, if their family requested, instead, I would make a donation to their favorite charity, whatever it was, right? And we all do that, or at least we should.
Right.
But what happens often is that you have this idea that instead of reaching into my own pocket and buying flowers or making a donation to a charitable fund, instead, we'll have the lodge do that. And that way it won't cost me anything.
Yes. That's
right?
one of my biggest pet peeves.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, as a lodge secretary, it probably is a pet peeve. And it's not just for funerals, but you'll hear somebody stand up and say, you know, I heard that Backwater Lodge had a big fire and they're trying to raise money to replace or to fix the building, and they had a lot of damages and things like that. And somebody will jump to their feet and say, Worshipful Master, I move that we donate $50 to Backwater Lodge. And somebody else will jump up and say, Worshipful Master, $50 is nothing. I think we ought to donate 100. And a third guy will jump up and say, well, if we're going to donate something, why don't we donate some real money? Let's donate 1,000. Now, meanwhile, the lodge treasurer and the worshipful master and the secretary have been scrimping and saving for years, trying to build up the lodge treasury. And now you got these 3 guys sitting on the sidelines that want to donate $1,000. And you know what? If that came to a vote, you know that 75% of the guys in the room are going to vote in favor of it.
Right.
And the reason they're going to vote in favor is because then they get to go home feeling all warm and fuzzy that they donated $1,000. And guess what? Not a one of them had to reach into their pocket in order to do it.
Yep.
They donated the lodge's money. They didn't donate anything. So we have a charitable fund, but we have very specific guidelines as to what it can be used for. Item number 9 is do not learn the ritual. Insist that you will confer the next degree. but do so without learning the ritual. If if anyone challenges you, just repeat, it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
Okay, as a district instructor, I see this far too often. I see it all the time. It's very sad.
Well, I'm not going to embellish on that except to say that we had that problem. Uh, we had somebody that we had a couple of practices, and on those practice nights, um, he was not ready to confer, but he was determined he was going to do it. And fortunately, the candidate called near to the last minute, and his wife was pregnant and she was expecting, and he just didn't want to be away from her on a night when she might need him. So we had to cancel that degree conferral, and we survived without him for it.
That's so funny. I bet they were worried when I conferred my first degree at Goliad. That's because as master, I wanted to do my job. I put in the work. We have floor school every Wednesday, and I put in the work, and I was up there every Wednesday for years. And I practiced doing that for at least a year. So I was ready when it was time. But I bet that everybody was on pins and needles that first time, wondering how I was going to do, because I am not a ritualist. I'm a philosophical guy. I'm not a memorization guy.
I'm not much of a ritualist either. I back in the 80s when I was a younger Mason, I was real good about organizing degree teams, and I'd call guys on the phone that really were not active Masons, and I would talk them into doing. I'd say, we really need you to come be the master of ceremonies. And they'd say, really? I go, yeah, if you'll come down there, I'll work with you. And, not a lot to memorize, and
Nice.
they would come do it and just feel like $1,000,000 that for the first time since they'd been a master Mason, they were able to actually contribute to the lodge. So I've got talents, obviously, having been a secretary for 30 years, I've got talents that I can bring to the table, and I can contribute to the fraternity without being a ritualist.
Yes.
Are you ready for number 10?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Number 10, your motto should be, I am the worshipful master, and what I say goes.
Yes.
And that kind of encapsulates the whole thing there. If you really want to be the worst worshipful master the lodge has ever had. And I've even written something here. It says, do all of these things, and your place as the worst master in the lodge's history will be assured. You will be a stain on the lodge's memory. You will be someone that is best forgotten. But I can assure you, you will not be forgotten.
That is awesome.
I know of a lodge that had a worshipful master that probably checked at least half of these boxes. And it's been several years, and his picture is not up there with the past masters at that lodge.
Really?
Yeah, it's just not up there.
Wow.
They still talk about it, but they do everything they can just to forget about it.
Well, I was inspired to write all this, and I think I put this together in about 30 minutes one day. And it was because we had just completed one of the absolute worst years the lodge ever had. And I must say that, over 30 years, I've worked with a lot of different men who have served as worshipful masters, and I've thoroughly enjoyed each and every one of them. They've all been wonderful men, and they all remain good friends of mine. And, I could say, well, this was only 1 out of 30. I hope it's 1 out of 100. I hope it's 1 out of 1,000. I hope if I were to live to be secretary for 1,000 years, I would hope that this would be the only one that would be this way. But for all you senior wardens out there that are contemplating going into the East here in a couple of months, make notes. Here's 10 points.
Yes. Yes.
And that really circles back to the intention, I think, behind this whole video, is because elections right around the corner. And look through this list. Listen to this video again if you need to. Look at the list. I'll put the list in the description of the video. Look through it, because if you be honest with yourself, because if you feel like you're starting to check some of these boxes it's not too late, but you need to do like a serious soul search before you go to the East and be willing to set that ego aside, because a lot of this is born of having an ego issue or
Well,
just being greedy.
I think
or an
that's
insecurity,
Yeah.
yeah.
ego
A
or
little bit of both.
insecurity.
I think we oftentimes misidentify. We say, well, he's an egotist, or he's got an ego problem. And um, the the real issue is that he's insecure, and he's terrified that anybody else is going to realize how insecure he is. He has doubts about his own capability, and he doesn't want anybody to realize it. So he compensates by being bold and brash and rude and dictatorial and all of those things. And so we see him and we say, well, he must really think he's special. Well, that's not it. He doesn't think he's special. He knows that he has flaws, and he's terrified anybody else is going to know it.
Overcompensating. I can see that now that you said that.
During my year in the East, I tried not to be egotistical. I tried to be effective. But again, I came from a different world in business. I had 3 transmission shops, and you want to talk about dealing with rough guys, you own a transmission shop. And so I came from a different world, and I needed a little bit of help learning how to be a good, effective leader for a volunteer organization. And I went to the officer leadership trainings, and I did everything that I could to learn. I wanted to be better, but I still had my shortcomings. But there was one past master that I love him to death. His name is Joe K. Hooten. And he would always say to me, Dennis, if it's good for the lodge, do it. If it's not good for the lodge, don't. And ultimately, what this list represents is a worshipful master throwing out the culture of a lodge and just trying to do things his own way and just be bullish about the way that he's going to focus his energy in his year in the East. And really, that's the last thing that we should be doing. We should be focused on what's best for the membership and not what's best for ourselves.
In fact, I think we talked about this earlier, and that is that as the worshipful master, you're really just supposed to be up there directing traffic.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it's not a question of what you want to do or whether you want to do something that's good for the lodge or not. That's not the question. The question is, what does the lodge want to do? And if you let the lodge plan things, if you let the lodge members express themselves and vote, right? It's simply your job to make sure that you have a good discussion that leads up to a good vote so that the majority prevails, right? And it's not about whether they're going to agree with what you want to do. Remember, you're just one man, and you may be sitting in the East right now, but you won't be next year. And you weren't in the East last year either. You're just one of the members of the lodge, and it's your turn to referee.
Yes.
And to add to that a little bit, the one thing I would say to all the senior wardens out there is, don't turn your lodge into the clone of a Lions Club.
Yes.
Don't think that you measure your lodge's success by how many service projects you did, or whether you participated in the town's Christmas parade, or whether you had an open house or not, right? Remember why you're there. We're Freemasons. The only thing we have in common, the only thing we're all interested in, is Freemasonry. I may like football. You may not. You may like golf or baseball or one of those round ball sports. I may be a Republican. You may be a Democrat. I went to Texas A&M. You may have gone to some other school over in Austin or someplace.
That other school.
Yeah, God knows.
One of those others.
But the point is, the one thing that we do all have in common is Freemasonry. So let's practice Freemasonry. Dennis and I talked about this earlier, and this is really a different discussion. But if this were if instead of this being a Masonic lodge, if instead this was a model train club, the Victoria Model Train Club, and we met every month and we had spaghetti on paper plates with our wives, and then we had a business meeting, you would expect that club would have a program about model trains every month. And if you were a visitor and it was your first meeting to attend, the reason you went was not to hear them read minutes. It was not to hear them give a treasurer's report. You didn't go for any of that. The only reason you as a visitor went was to hear a program that you assumed was going to be about model trains, because it is, after all, a model train club, right? But how many Masonic lodges do we have across the state of Texas that have never had a program about Masonry? Or if they have, it's been a long time, and they don't do it every month, and they don't really have anybody that's capable of giving a program, because the members and the officers really don't know anything about Masonry. The only thing they know about Masonry is the ritual they've memorized.
Yeah.
Very
Yes,
true.
for sure.
They don't have a lodge library full of Masonic books that they could go refer to. And I think that's the real shame of it. That's the real problem with American Freemasonry today, is that we've got all these lodges and only 5% of the membership really know anything about Freemasonry and its history, its philosophy, and its beautiful symbolism.
Well, I would also
Agreed.
add to your point that, for example, the Lions Club, since you brought that up, the Lions Club was built from the ground up to be very good at what it does. It was designed to be a service organization. It's very good at what it does.
Mm-hmm.
Freemasonry was not designed to be a service organization. And if you try to be the Lions Club with a Masonic Lodge, you're going to fail. I mean, you might do some service projects, but you'll never be the Lions Club, and you'll never reach your full potential as a lodge because you're trying to be something you're not.
Well, we were having a discussion the other evening, half a dozen other Masons and myself, and one of them talked about how a local lodge had, a few years ago, had decided to have a car show every year. And so people bring antique cars in from all over, and they have a big car show, and how that has really been good for that lodge, and the lodge members love it, and so on and so forth. And I just thought, that's like having a model train club that knows nothing about model trains.
Yes.
They've got a Masonic lodge that knows all about having a car show, right? But they don't know how to do Freemasonry, and that's the shame of it.
Well, a lot of these lodges also do this to attract members, but the thing is, if you fry fish or do a car show to attract members, they're attracted because they like cars, for example, since we're doing a car show, right? But really, the organization has nothing to do with cars. There might be some people in there that are like-minded, but it's not like an antique car club or something like that, if that makes sense. So they're going to join under their wrong pretenses.
But see, doing these things like having a car show, or having a domino tournament, or having a blood drive, or having a fish fry, or a picnic, or a service project, or going out and cleaning up 2 miles of highway every 3 months, so that you can have a little sign on the highway that says your lodge cleans up that highway 4 times a year. All these things like that make your lodge more like a Lions Club. That's the low-hanging fruit,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you get a string of lodge officers, master and wardens, and it's too much trouble to go open a book and put together a program about Freemasonry for your members. Remember, that's the one thing everybody should be interested in, right? Freemasonry, remember, right? And because that's too much trouble, opening that book, or finding the book because you don't have it to begin with. The low-hanging fruit is no, we'll just have a fish fry, or we'll just have a pancake breakfast, or we'll just have a spaghetti supper, or we'll just have a picnic, or we'll just have a car show, or we'll have a blood drive, or we'll go clean up 2 miles of highway.
Yeah, that's because they revert back to, well, it's really all about the fellowship. They instead of it being all about the Freemasonry, it's all about the fellowship, and we all enjoy each other's time, enjoy each other while we're spending time together. And the reality is how are you becoming better in that scenario?
Yeah.
How are you learning more about Freemasonry? And I'm sorry, but my attraction to Freemasonry in the beginning was through books. I spent 10 years collecting books about Freemasonry and reading them before I ever became a Mason. I accidentally learned about Freemasonry in the library when I was going to college. And I learned about this fraternity that had existed since the 1700s or before. And I was fascinated by it. It had been in France, it had been in England and Scotland. And this fraternity had come to the United States, and Benjamin Franklin and George Washington were all Freemasons. And it fascinated me that it still existed, because it seemed like a fraternity that probably should have died out back in the 1800s. But I knew that it still existed. I just didn't know any Masons. I didn't. So for 10 years, I collected books about the fraternity and read them. And you can see books in my library behind me here. It wasn't until after I got out of the Air Force that I learned my father-in-law was a Mason, and he directed me to the local lodge, and I joined and became a Master Mason and started going to the monthly meetings. And you can imagine how disappointed I was in those monthly meetings.
Yeah. Well, Justin,
they read the minutes, they paid the bills, they had the treasurer's report, they had committee reports, they balloted on candidates, and they went home.
Mm-hmm. Lather, rinse, repeat every month.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we were talking about, the pursuit of the soul, and how it's how important it is for us to, feed our intellect and our spirit, and that's what develops our soul. And it's very it's almost like a curse, because for every one book that we have, we've got 10 other books on the shelf that we purchased because we have that one book and it spurred these thoughts, and we had to buy these other 10 books to start reading because of this one book. And I've got hundreds of books for the same reason, that I start reading and I've got all these thoughts and I'm so far behind. It's like a curse. Freemasonry is like a curse to me. And but I feel better about it. I feel better about myself because I have that curse.
I'm not big on shopping, but I enjoy
That's
going to
my
half-price
Achilles heel.
books.
Oh my gosh.
Let me go into half-price books. And I'm sitting there looking at all these books, and then I'm
It doesn't even have to be half price.
Well, then I'm thinking about all the books I have at home that I still haven't finished. It's like, oh man, but there's definitely.
But you got to get it because you don't want somebody else to get it.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about reading the book. It's what's in it more or less, right? And if you're ever doing a research paper, or you're ever putting together a program for your lodge, and you're looking for information about a particular topic, you can say, aha, I know what book that's in. That's in that blue book that I bought at half price book
yes
3 years ago. And you go find it on your shelf and you pull it down and you go, that's what I'm looking for right there.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, that's exactly right. As a matter of fact, I've got too many overflowing shelves right now. My wife has told me that for Father's Day, I'm getting a nice set of bookshelves, one that'll take over my whole wall. So I'm pretty excited about that. I'll get to have a real bookshelf with everything, set of bookshelves, kind of like yours back there. You got a beautiful library. I love your library.
Well, you're looking at part of it, but over
That's
here.
the one at your house, right?
You're looking at a window. That's a window, but on the other side, there's more bookshelves over here. So, yeah, this is in my house.
Yes, that's
I
you
have
have
a
a
big
huge one
library.
at the lodge, and you have a huge library at the house. It's
Yeah. In fact, I'm meeting a young man tomorrow. I hadn't seen him in a few years, but he contacted me and said he's writing a research paper and wanted to know if I had 3 or 4 books. And I said, yes, I do. And he said, can I come visit you and we'll make copies of some of those? And I said, yeah. So he's going to meet me tomorrow about 1:30, and we're going to go to Copy Corner and make copies, hundreds of copies.
very nice. One of the things that I'm seriously considering is going ahead and buying a book scanner so that I can scan whatever I need when I need to and
Sure.
do my research.
Neat.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can pull a pike and just cut and paste and create my own book based off of all the works of everyone else. I'm not
Brother,
knocking Pike for all our brothers out there. Don't get all upset. Don't get butthurt.
yeah.
That's how it was back in the day. That's how people wrote.
Sure.
They
Brother Norman, I appreciate you coming on. I want to be respectful of your time. I know
yes,
it's getting late. Do we want to go and jump into final thoughts, Dennis?
yes. Go right ahead, Pete.
Well, I think I already gave my final thought. The way I wrote this was, if you do these things, you will be the worst worshipful master, right? Obviously, nobody wants to be the worst worshipful master ever, right? And so if you took notes, then you should know, don't, here's 10 things to not do. And remember that you're not up there in the East to put on a show for everybody, and your lodge members are just the audience. No, you're up there to kind of preside and let the lodge go where it wants to go. Let the lodge members decide what they want to do. Let them have their little discussion. And then you're the one that has to decide when the discussion has gone on too long, and then end the discussion and call for a vote and let the lodge do what it wants to do. If you've got lodge traditions, don't trample on them. If you have lodge rules, don't break your own lodge rules. Try to seek a consensus among your members so that everybody's happy.
Yes. Well, I would just say the term "my year" gets thrown around a lot, and I think that's part of the problem. It's not your year; it's your opportunity to serve the lodge for a year or however long that ends up being. And like has been pointed out, if you go in there like a dictator, and to be honest, I think a lot of people equate that with leadership. They think everyone's looking at them and they have to have an answer for everything. I would say plan out the year and be willing to. So I was in the Air Force as well, and one of the most important things I learned is that it's okay not to have the answer, but it's not okay not to find out the answer after that. And where I'm going with this is you don't have to have the answer to everything that's presented, but you do need to know where to find the answer. You need to know who to talk to and or who to go to get things taken care of. But if you feel like you have to be the end all, excuse me, if you feel like you have to be the ultimate authority on everything at the lodge, that leads you down the list that we're talking about here. We have to, as leaders, we have to be humble and we have to be servant leaders. And we have to remember that we are there to serve the will and pleasure of the lodge for that year, not our will and pleasure. Sometimes votes may go the way that we don't like, but we're just there to facilitate. We're just there to be we are King Solomon, right? We are expected to be wise and impartial and go with the will of the lodge. So don't be the person in this list. Don't be that. And if you find yourself erring close to one of these, take a step back and just stop what you're doing, because that is a big giveaway that you're going down the wrong track for whatever out of a business is being brought up or whatever decision is being made. So Brother Norman, like I said, this is not the first time you've been on the show. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation tonight. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation we had last time. Every time I hear you speak, nothing but wisdom comes out. So I really appreciate that. And after being
Tell
on the
my
show,
wife that, would you?
so thank you again.
Thank you.
Well, I will. I'll wrap this up with saying, this is not only extended to the worshipful master, but every level of authority within Freemasonry, and you can kind of see the trend with brothers who sometimes overstep in the role that they're in because they didn't never learn those lessons as master. I firmly believe that old past master Joe K, he was right. If it's good for the lodge, do it. If it's not, don't. And every member has one vote, just like Pete said earlier. I firmly agree with that as well. And those are the two things that he would always tell me. You got one vote. Even as the master, he would say, you got one vote. And that way it would always remind me that I'm still part of this bigger thing, that it's still just one vote in this bigger cog, this bigger wheel, just one cog in the wheel. And I think we have to remind ourselves of that. And no matter what position that we serve in life, we have to remember that we only have one opinion of many, and we have to consider all aspects of other people and their personalities and where they're coming from in life and what their perception of Freemasonry is when we try to make decisions for the lodge, or not for the lodge, but for the will of the lodge. If we're the tiebreaker on something and we have to make a decision, then we have to consider, what's the culture of the lodge, and who's this that's trying to oppose the culture of the lodge, and what's their intention. And then we have to navigate through that. That's our job as worshipful master, is to help bring those two positions together in understanding. And sometimes it's simply as plain as that's not the culture of the lodge. We have it right here. If your lodge does not have a culture, it does not have a defined culture and defined rules like St. Albans, then I recommend you do pursue getting the lodge members involved in creating that. Start with a vision statement to understand what your lodge is about, and then go from there. But I would encourage you to do exactly what Pete said earlier. Remember, you're not a train club. You're a Freemason. That should be at the very beginning of your vision statement. How to put Freemasonry first, and then all other things are secondary. So with that being said, there's one more opportunity coming for Pete to come on the show for sure that I know of, and that is going to be with King Solomon's Yacht Club. We are going to pursue that further, and he touched on it with the Train Club. So we are going to pursue that further because that is a compelling parable that we really need to discuss at some point. And so I'm securing that discussion on this show right now on tonight, so that we have you reserved, Pete, because that's a good one. We talked about that earlier today, and it was just, I wish I had heard that 10 years ago. It would have drastically changed the things that I'd said on this show, because it's so plain and simple and clear and concise. It helps people understand what Freemasonry is. And so we'll do that one on the next one, and help some of these brothers understand what Freemasonry is.
I look forward to it.
And what it isn't. So
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you as always. I can't wait for that next scotch and conversation at your house. I thoroughly enjoyed the last one. I can't wait for the next one. And all you brothers out there, keep it between the points.